Alright, so this next video is going to be about a derivative rule, in particular the quotient rule, which basically states that if you take the derivative of two functions divided by each other, that's why it's called the quotient rule, divided, so f of x divided by g of x, with respect to x, you will get this huge mess right here of g of x times f prime of x minus f of x times g prime of x, all over g of x squared. Okay, so this video is going to be about a proof, the quotient rule right up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is write the derivative of f of x over g of x with respect to x. And then I plug it into our limit definition. From there, I'm going to make sure that these denominators right here are equal. So what I'm going to do is multiply this by g of x over g of x, and then this term right here by g of x plus h divided by g of x plus h. And then I'm going to multiply both denominators by the h here, because we're dividing by it right here. So limit as h goes to 0, you're going to end up with f of x plus h times g of x, so they multiply this by this, minus f of x times g of x plus h, all over h times, now we have to do the common denominator, which is g of x times g of x plus h. Now, just like we did in the product rule, we're going to have to add a couple terms just to make our life a little bit easier. In this case, we're going to be adding f of x g of x, and then because we're adding it, we also have to subtract it, f of x g of x. Line there. All right, to make our life a little bit easier, I'm going to reorder this numerator just so it's easier for us to understand before we start factoring everything. So we're going to have f of x plus h g of x, and I'm going to combine that with this minus f of x g of x. That way our g of x's are together. So I'm going to put a line through here just so I know that I dealt with those. Next, I'm going to combine the f of x's. So I'm going to do minus f of x g of x plus h plus f of x g of x. So we did those. Then I'm going to still divide it by h g of x g of x plus h. Okay, from here I'm going to factor out the g of x, and on this side I'm going to factor out the f of x. So what you'll end up getting, limit as h goes to 0, we're going to get g of x times f of x plus h minus f of x and I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this f of x. So I have minus f of x times this g of x plus h right here. Now it's going to be plus the g of x here, but since it's minus, I have to convert it to a subtraction sign, just because the minus times a minus will be the plus that it says up here. End bracket, and then all of this is going to be divided by h g of x over g of x plus h. Okay, from here, hopefully you see that you can take this whole term and divide it by h, and you'll end up with f prime of x, and then you can do the same thing here with divided by h, and you'll get g prime of x. So you end up coming up with, and then after you divide out this h, the h isn't in the numerator anymore, so you can actually plug in that h is 0. So then you end up with g of x f prime of x minus f of x times g prime of x all over g of x times g of x, because this h went to 0. So you end up with g of x squared. And if you see up here, this actually proves our quotient rule that it works. So if you have any questions about quotient rule, it's a little bit more complicated than product rule, but once you go through all the algebra, it shouldn't be too bad. So if you have any questions about this, let me know.